I'm going to share a couple of quotes, Andy. So it just to complement what you've been sharing. So the quotes I'm going to share are from someone by the name of Graham Cook. Uh, and I love the fact that a lot that what you have just shared right now, is very similar to what he's been saying. So I'm just going to read a few quotes from him. He says, Everyone who is anybody knows that kingdom cannot come through church. Kingdom cannot come through church. Church has to come through kingdom. We are preaching the gospel of the kingdom. We are not anti-church. We are not anti or anti-church. In fact, we love the church, but we have to get things in the right order. It's the kingdom that is the overlying power over the enemy. And the church is an expression of that kingdom. The kingdom is about the church being involved in the world. Whatever God gives to us, we pass out to everyone that we meet, so that no one is safe from a blessing. We will find out the real from the false. We will find out who is committed to kingdom and who is just committed to their own empire. Every time you build church without a sense of the kingdom, without a sense of the kingdom attached to it, if you don't put kingdom first, you're building something just for yourself. The church is on a collision course with kingdom right now. The church is on a collision course with kingdom right now, and it is not about how can we fit the kingdom into what we are doing. Forget that. God is going to expand our understanding of the kingdom and then stretch everything that we do as a community so that we fit everything, that heaven wants to do here on earth. I'm going to share another quote by Professor Howard Snyder, who was a professor at the Tyndale Seminary in Toronto, Canada, and he was also the professor of history and theology of mission, and he also pastored in Brazil and in Chicago and Detroit. So he came up. I found this amazing quote of his that, man, I think you'll love this as well. It blew me away, and I'm not forgotten it. He says, "Kingdom people seek first the kingdom of God and its justice. Church people often put church work above concerns of justice, mercy, and truth. Church people think about how to get people into the church. Kingdom people think about how to get the church into the world. Kingdom people think about how to get the church into the world. Church people worry that the world might change the church. Kingdom people work to see the church change the world." Now, this is from a professor of history and theology of mission, and who's also pastored as well. So, pretty incredible, pretty profound quotes right there. So I think that dovetails with everything that you've shared right now. If I can ask now, the words that you've shared are deep, heavy, and profound. But for someone who's a pastor in say somewhere in Asia or somewhere in the Middle East, how can they, and if they've heard these quotes I've just shared, and if they've heard you right now, what can they practically do, or what adjustments do they need to make, or how can they check themselves to make sure that they're not not just building church, but they're building kingdom. What can they do to make sure that um, that they are preaching the gospel of the kingdom and not just the gospel of salvation? What does that sound like? What does that look like? And how does that impact leadership,
Okay.
especially and decision making in
Yeah.
especially in these times?
Now we can get all caught up with the terminologies, and we can get all caught up with the theories and get lost in a world of just throwing the word kingdom around. At the end of the day, it all boils down to the extent to which we defer to God and His rule, the extent to which we allow that deference to affect all dimensions of our behavior, our motivations, our drives, and at the same time, the extent to which that deference affects the way in which we bring people into a state of life and empowerment. Simple. Now, we could get all, as they say in New Zealand, get our knickers in a twist and get all lopsided with just kind of talking kingdom. Again, listen, the problem is I've been around moves of God over the years, and the sad thing is that we get caught up with the jargons and we sometimes miss the practice. So there was a time when the term reformation was a byword. Everyone used it. It was like one of those catchphrases. It was being trended as it were. And people just assume that once you throw reformation as part of the lingo or dialect, then you're a reformation man. And the danger that we're having today is that people are beginning to draw or gravitate towards the kingdom. And I want to be very, very careful in saying that the utilization of the term does not necessarily mean that you are adhering to its principles and its rules. So everyone is now touting kingdom. It's a kingdom this, a kingdom this, a kingdom that. But at the end of the day, the issue that God is concerned about is not the lingo, not the dialect, not the messaging, not the preaching, not the book writing. What he's after is a very simple triangle. The extent to which I defer to him and his rule, the extent to which that rule superimposes itself upon my life and my behavior, and the extent to which my life that is being changed and transformed basically influence and empower humanity that's in front of me, whether it be the immediate members within my congregation or church, whether it be my community, whether it be my family, whether it be my friends, the extent to which the extrusion of a powerful existence move out of me and influence many others. Now, that in a nutshell is what life is all about. It is not a matter of hanging on to the jargon, not hanging on to the concept. It is not a matter of preaching and talking and saying and mentioning the word kingdom in order for it to be considered valid and authentic. Life exists within that dynamic triangle. Now, let's get back to some just pure practicals. You are a leader. You are trying to build an effective community wherever you might be. There are some critical issues you have to be concerned about. For some people, if you are so far left, you have to get right back to rewriting. You have to literally clean the slate and start over again. Others are, it's as though you are moving in the right direction. It might be off a little bit. You know, it's like a guy who is into shooting and aiming, and so for all his life he does all what he's supposed to do. He applies himself, he practices, he understands how to deal with the wind, speed, etc. And so when he takes aim, he may not necessarily hit bullseye, but I promise you he won't miss the entire marker entirely. And there are some leaders who are like that. They are doing all the right things, but maybe not necessarily hitting bullseye. Just a little adjustment, and that's, some of them may need that, while others may just need to wipe the slate clean. But no matter where you are, whether you are just missing the mark slightly or whether you are off by a million miles, the basic principle remains the same for no matter who you are. Number one, it's a matter of literally almost like submitting yourself to God in an overwhelming way to look at his principles and his rules with fresh eyes. Now that's important. because looking with fresh eyes means that you no longer look at the principles and allowing your look to be prejudiced by past understanding. Because if you go back and you examine the principles out of the paradigm of your past understanding, all you'll do is regurgitate and rebuild what you've always built before. Now, the fresh eye look, it sounds easier than how it really must be executed or implemented, because it really takes a certain amount of depth within yourself, and takes a significant amount of canceling out within your own heart for you to begin to look at truth from a different perspective. That is why I have found that the majority of people who are beginning to really look at the Word of God from a particular angle, they are not looking at it from an academic perspective. It's as though their lives were thrown in a tailspin, and from a position of total brokenness, they begin to look again. Because as long as you try to just make that shift from your comfortable space and you just kind of look at the Word of God again, you begin, it still gets tainted. You know, as Jesus said, that you have to become a child. You have to literally die. Those are concepts that we can't deviate from, that the kingdom of God does not allow entry at the point of maturity. The kingdom does not allow entry at the point of life. You have to die. Brokenness is a critical issue. How do you do that? I don't know how you do that. You can't go and self-flagellate, but there must be a process that God must engineer within your own life that brings you to the end of yourself, that you could no longer look at yourself with this great sense of admiration and approval, but you begin to redesign and reconstruct your life from a position from, I am a child, I'm starting all over again, I am going through a process of radical death. Those are very important starters. Because if you don't start there, friend, you will find yourself just still holding on to your title, still holding on to your terminology, still holding on to your big church mindset, still in pursuit of all of these wrong definition of success. Death is critical. What I have realized, and I've seen this across the world over the last couple of years, the majority of people that I have seen who are deeply penitent, completely committed to truth, even to the point of their own pain and their own hurts, are those people that God literally sent through the rigor, sent them through the rigor. These are people whose hearts are so completely broken. It's as though they have literally died to their previous state of existence, no matter what it was, and they have emerged in a brand new place. That process is like, listen, man, for me, I value that. The last 6 years of my life is the most treasured part of my whole existence. It's been the most painful, but the most purposeful. It's been the most brutal, but it has been absolutely the most blessed. Listen, that thing is critical. That process of death is important. It is the starting point of a brand new you. And from there, it comes down to just other practicals in terms of new relationships. It comes down to forming new alliances. Don't reduce yourself to just submitting yourself to some other man in some network. That model is archaic. It is wrong. And so we have a whole bunch of apostolic networks emerging all over the earth, which is nothing more than a euphemism for another denomination, manipulative, imperialistic religious order. What we need in the earth today are just wonderful, excellent relationships, not a bunch of men basically submitting themselves to some kind of Stockholm syndrome masquerading as loyalty. What we need are relationships. I need friends around me. I don't need a whole bunch of men above me. As a matter of fact, the Bible speaks less about covering and more about foundations. We ignore foundations and run for covering because we don't have a set of comfort within ourselves and confidence within ourselves. What the average leader needs is genuine relationships who could nudge him forward, not necessarily throw him forward, to nudge him forward and go through the incremental process of change. And I am a strong believer in the incremental process, because listen, we could try to have this overwhelming transformative process in our own lives, and all we do is frustrate ourselves. There's a guy called Dave Brailsford who pioneered a very simple concept and that simple concept allowed the UK cycling team to move from complete failures to absolute winners. And this guy basically says, you don't have to try to make these overwhelming changes. Incremental, in small areas. 1% adjustments every single day could absolutely result in overwhelming transformation. To the average leader, it's not that you have to go and pray for 5 hours and pray for 40 days. It's 5 minutes or a very intense, God, I need your help. And from a point of sincerity, make those incremental changes. Move that mountain one pebble at a time. Eat that elephant one spoonful at a time. Make that 1,000-mile journey one step at a time. And if you commit yourself to that simple, incremental, day-to-day transformative process, God will help you along the way. And sometimes within that incremental adjustment, you have quantum moments where you leap forward in an astronomical way, and you are the one at the end of the day look back and say, wow, I never knew this was possible. And so for the average leader, commit yourself to a process of brokenness. Throw off all of those titles, the reverend and the bishop and the apostle and all this kind of stuff. Get back to the most basic. Like John said on the Isle of Patmos, I, John, your brother and companion, the most expert apostolic figure on the planet in those days, could address himself, not I, John, the one who laid his head against the breast of Jesus, the mighty apostle of love. No, I, John, your brother and companion. Bring yourself right back down to the most rudimentary level and be normal. Stop being this highfalutin, hard to reach, impossible, this guy way out there that nobody could touch. Bring yourself down to the most basic. Be real, be normal, be practical. Reach out to genuine friends who could nudge you forward, encourage you, and bring you to a place of broader sight. And at the end of it all, just allow the grace of God to permeate your life and your heart, and truly love people and try to represent the values in a way that is real, that is genuine, and that's authentic. This is not rocket science. Simple principles that I think works for me, and I think could work for a lot of other people.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. I thank you for that. Wow. That was so powerful and true and profound. If I can just add to what you're saying as well, if I just look back at my 16 years, as much as I'm grateful to say a sermon I would have heard, or a message I would have heard, or a Bible study that I would have attended, or a prayer meeting that I would have been a part of, the most powerful, the most impactful times for me have been conversations with friends. The most refining times, the most renewing times for me have actually been conversations with friends in the car or over a meal. It's not really been in a conference setting necessarily, or in a church building necessarily. It's been in the context of friendship and friends with whom I can be brutally honest, friends with whom I can be transparent, friends who I've known for 16 years.
Now let me jump in there, Tara. I think let me kind of make an interjection there. That what you're saying is so incredibly important, because one of the reasons why people are untrusting, they're not willing to trust a friend or submit or create an environment of transparency and openness with another friend, is because, listen, people take your private information and sometimes use it against you.
Mm-hmm.
And we must come to the point where a personal conversation with you remains personal.
Mm-hmm.
That we need to dispense of the gossip and the betrayal. What we have for friendship today is what I call chivalry with a knife held behind the back.
Mm-hmm.
We will put a hand out and greet you nicely, but we are waiting almost to stab in the back. I have gotten to a point in my own life where I told people that, listen, most people most of them, there's a few people I deeply trust and I could submit to in a heartbeat. But after a while, even within the corridors of Christianity, I tell people, listen, I treat most people like a snake handler.
Mhm.
I watch them, I keep my eyes on them, I am very, very, very careful around them, and I always anticipate their strike. And unfortunately, those people have never betrayed me, or rather, they never failed to act just consistent with their normal. And
Mhm.
so it is important that in terms of building genuine friendship, that we need people that who can really guard, protect, we can trust, they can trust us, not individuals who, what I call fiendish friends. They
Mhm.
hang around you, but they will cut your throat in an instant.
Mhm.
And we have too many of those. And the overpopulation of those fiendish friends is what causes people to live in isolation. They go through their pain, they go through their struggles simply because they do not trust the average individual, because humanity is still too prominent in the average man.
Yeah. So I think it's about rediscovering uh, the simple old-fashioned friendship. I was telling some friends recently that something is wrong because it feels like when I was not saved, um, uh, we actually did friendship better. We
Mm-hmm.
actually did friendship better in schools and in the colleges than we in our universities than we are doing right now. When really we should be examples of what, and we should be experts really at demonstrating what healthy friendship and old-fashioned, simple old-fashioned friendship should look like and looks like. And the world should envy the friendships that they should envy our friendships, and they should
Yeah.
look at our friendships and say that, oh man, I want that. I want what these guys have.
Mm.
And I think what the trap, and I was talking to a few friends and just telling them that I think the trap that we have all fallen into, uh, uh, unknowingly perhaps, is that we are probably caught up with this, um, um, or we have fallen into this whole cycle of, and it's a global thing, in trying to impress people into the building, trying to
Mm.
impress people into the church, trying to impress people into the kingdom, instead of loving people into the kingdom. And there's a distinct difference between trying to impress someone into the kingdom versus trying to versus being intentional about loving people into the kingdom. And so yeah, I hear you, and yeah, I mean, on that same note, I mean, coming from a Hindu background, something which I felt very strongly was that in the in other faith communities, I come from a Hindu background, and obviously there are other faith communities. There was more unity in those faith communities than there was in you know in that I saw between churches, and we have the message of love, we have the message of forgiveness that we blare. It's all over YouTube. The sermons are all there. Every church has its videos out there, and we are known for the message of forgiveness, and we are known for the message of the church is the message of the cross, the message of forgiveness, and people hear about that, and even people from other faiths know that that's the church's primary message. But when it comes to seeing that in practice, when it comes down to seeing that demonstrated, they don't see that demonstrated. And so I
Mm.
lost count of the number of people who, at the mega church where I was at, I mean, on the weekly basis, monthly basis, announcements would be made about, oh, we've had 50 people get baptized today, 100 people get baptized this month, or whatever. But I knew the backs. On the other hand, I knew that out of those 50 or 100, how many of them within the first year were going back to their old faith, were backsliding, not for any other reason, but because they were seeing the double standard, they were seeing the hypocrisy, they were seeing the inconsistency, and they were seeing that the talk was awesome. There was charismatic talk, but the walk was not matching the talk. And
Mm.
so as new believers, they couldn't handle that, and so they came to a place, sadly, where they bought into that whole thought process, subscribed to that thought process that said, well, if this is what it is, then we are better off in our old. There's more authenticity in our old belief
Mm.
system and old faith than
Yes.
what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah.
So